Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. My name is David Danto. I'm Dimension Data's Principal Consultant for Collaboration. I'm also the IMCCA's Director of Emerging Technology. I'm back here. We're the gang of four here. Funny meeting you guys again in this situation, but we had such popularity around the recording we did previewing InfoComm and what was going on in the UC world that we figured we'd all get back together and yell at each other about what we got wrong and congratulate each other about what we got right and see what was going on. So I'll ask everybody to introduce themselves. Jules, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Jules Trono. I'm the president and owner of Compass Business Solutions. We're a technology training company partnered with IMCCA and InfoComm.
David?
Hi, thanks. I'm David Maldow, CEO and founder of Let's Do Video. We're an online news site covering UC and visual collaboration. Check us out at letsdovideo.com and please sign up for the free newsletter.
And Simon?
Hi, I'm Simon Dudley, Chief Contrarian for Accession Events. My book's just out in a couple of weeks, actually very exciting stuff. And yeah, you can learn a lot more about me on our website, accessionevents.com.
Terrific. Thank you guys for joining me again. So let's talk about InfoComm. InfoComm by the numbers this year. I'm staring at some of the numbers that came in over here. There's a record audience, first time, over 39,000 attendees. There were about 1,000 or so people in the unified communication sessions that we were all part of, and I think there are still about 300 or 400 people still looking for a parking spot right now. Dave, you were telling us about some difficulties you had with that. You want to give us a bit of a color around that?
I mean, you put me in a spot because I hate to be a complainer, but I can't lie. There was one day in particular, the wait was so long, I hate to exaggerate, but it was long enough that even I took a picture and tweeted it out. People were abandoning their friends who were driving their cars and running in because they were late for their meetings. But if that's the worst thing that happened, I can't complain. But yes, it was real.
You know, we know that Orlando has its drawbacks, and Vegas has its drawbacks too. There are a lot of people that would like to see it in one place only, but it needs to go East Coast, West Coast because of a number of things that I understand InfoComm is dealing with. But boy, I certainly would have liked to see the logistics be a little bit better.
The shuttle buses from the local hotels were pretty good, though. I have to say that worked out well for us.
So that's the trick. Don't rent any cars. Don't drive. Just take the shuttle.
Don't drive. I walked from InfoComm, put me up because I gave a talk on Tuesday, and I walked the 200 yards from my hotel and was soaked to the skin. Do not wear a suit under any circumstances in Florida, period.
Yeah, I used to tell the story that I used to park around back of the convention center and walk through the hallway, along the corridor, just getting to the correct convention center. And by the time I got to the front, just from the car, I needed to shower again. But yeah. That's just me. So speaking of Tuesday, Simon, you want to tell us what happened at Future Trends? I know you were a speaker there and saw some of the other events.
Yeah, it was an interesting day. First time I've done Future Trends. I was very happy for InfoComm to invite me along. I'm guessing because of some of my interaction with the IMCCA, which I'm a board member of. There was a whole bunch of stuff. It was actually interesting to me because it was a packed audience. We had, I'm guessing, about 250, 260 people there. It ebbed and flowed a bit, but most people stayed the day. There was a lot of talk there about how the world is changing. For the average AV reseller, dare I say that the indication was the game is up. This idea that you can put a 30% markup on expensive products, kind of, I don't want to use the word bamboozle because I'm sure they're adding lots of value, but keeping all the magic in the box and the manufacturers would allow you to cobble together a lot of stuff and then make a lot of money out of it. That's going away, and it's going away rapidly for two reasons. One, the technology is very obviously getting much easier. We're going to talk about this later, I think, but things like the Cisco video conferencing products and most of the whiteboarding technologies are plug in an Ethernet cable, plug in a power lead, and away you go. So the magic's out the box, and the cost is also ludicrously low. There was the first speaker of the day talked about how cheap big displays are now. I mean, even 4K, there's super duper technology, which I know we're going to talk about later. You can buy a decent-sized 4K display now for well under $1,000 and haven't even been out 2 years. So we can't even work out what we're going to do with them. So it's remarkable. I thought that was an interesting trend, and everyone basically that day spoke of it. I didn't go to the keynote, so others will need to speak about those. But for the general sessions on the Tuesday, it was interesting that you can't continue to do what you've always done. That will not get you where you need to be next year.
Yeah, I saw that in the UC full-day seminar that we did on Tuesday as well, at the same time as future trends where, we're all accepting the fact that change is here, it's now. A lot of people are not even saying it's coming, they're saying it's here, and what are we doing about it? So I would agree with you. We had a large number of attendees, a lot of people very interested, so that trend continues. I know, David and Jules, you guys were at the keynote this year. You want to talk about that very briefly?
Yeah, I hate to, like David said earlier, I hate to be a complainer, but the keynote was strange. It was entertaining. The host was entertaining, the technology writer from the New York Times, I believe, and they had some great people on stage as panelists, but the questions asked were bizarre. And they started with drones, and from there it was obvious that it wasn't really about our industry. So while it was entertaining, it would have been nicer if they had tied some of the topics back to the things that, as an industry, we care about, with the AV integration and how's the effect on the customer and everything else. We have these great resources available to us with Cisco on stage and Crestron and AMX and Samsung, but then nothing that really gave them the opportunity to give an answer that would have been something where everybody in the audience went, ooh. There was none of that.
Dave, how many people were in the keynote? Was it packed, or was it the light audience? Or
It was pretty packed. It was a pretty big arena, and most of the rows were filled. I mean, you could find a seat. It wasn't standing room only, but it didn't look empty.
No, but there was a lot of funny references, like to portable technology, right, wearable technology, and things like that, but never tying it back to AV.
Yeah, I had a similar perspective. I thought it was a great keynote. I mean, it was entertaining. Everyone on stage was a rock star, and they were all very good at it. And the topic it's such an incredible. I'm very excited about the Internet of Things, and of all the trends that we've seen in years before, this is the one that you just can't deny. And I don't want to take too much time, but something happened yesterday that was actually related. It was an Internet. I've been thinking. We all know the value of Internet of Things. Everything's connected. Everything's sensing. Everything's helping. But just thinking about knowing where everything is. I mean, I have a chip in my cat. I could never lose my cat again. My phone, if I lose my phone, my wife's phone finds my phone. And we just put, Grandma had to go to a retirement home, and we settled her in yesterday, and it's wonderful. Everyone's so nice. I'm so relieved because I was so
LoJack Grandma,
Yeah. She looks at this thing, and she says, David, they could find me wherever I go. And I said, well, that's because they know you're going to try to sneak away. And she goes, how did they know I'm so sneaky? And I'm thinking, Grandma's a thing. But as the technology gets better and better, eventually to become trivial to put a chip in any little thing. Could you imagine a world where no one loses a wedding ring ever again? I mean, this is really something that we can't deny is going to happen. And to tie it back in, just to wrap up, tie it back in, AV is going to be a huge part of it because a lot of it's going to be video, a lot of it's going to be audio, a lot of it's going to be connected. And I think we're interested in it, and we want to know, like Jules was saying, okay, this is great. How does it affect what we do, and where's our place in it? And there was a little bit of a connection missing.
Yeah.
Okay. Simon, I thought you were going to say something, but I guess...
Well, I guess I was going to... Dave kind of drew it all back together again, but the Internet of Things and AV, I mean, I think one could argue and I'll talk about this later perhaps, in my session on Wednesday when my talk was about UC and I had 6 people on the panel and no one defined UC the same way as anyone else. Can anyone define what AV is anymore? Because AV, Jules, you were saying it's got nothing to do with drones, could have everything to do with drones, potentially, depending on what you define AV to be. The problem with our industry has always been it never defines itself. It defines itself as to what product am I shilling this week.
That's interesting you say that because I just wrote a blog on that for Network World where I was saying that the lack of substantive understanding of what UC is actually something the manufacturers like because they can all claim they're within this product space when it doesn't have specific detailed boundaries. Yeah. And it's up to us as the consumers and as the technologists to understand and catch manufacturers and say, you know what, no, not going to buy into that today. So it's
not just a case of it fits within. Whatever a manufacturer says it is, and therefore that is the template that everyone else must follow. And patently, your product is only good if it looks like my product. Well, that's patently nonsense. But the world has played that game for a long time. Someone needs to come up with a good definition of what AV and UV and UC and VC and all those other 2-letter acronyms are all about.
And to be fair, Yeah, drones are interesting, right? And there might be video in the drone. In fact, when we did the workplace transformation session, we actually showed this very funny picture of what is this? And it was a drone being used with video in it for a shepherd trying to find his sheep. All right, cool. There's video in it. I'm saying in the keynote, they didn't relate it back to anything having to do with either audio or video.
Well, and also, Jules, from what you just said, none of the people on the panel are involved in the drone market at all.
Right.
If you'd had, say, Kevin Kelly from Stampede up there, then there's a man who knows about drones, but he wasn't, exactly. So why talk about it?
Exactly.
Well, because it's sexy. It's a sexy topic. It's fun to talk about.
I've been to a lot of conferences this year, CES and NAB, and there hasn't been a conference without a drone arena. It's almost interesting. It's, like they work the circuit, the drone arenas travel from trade show to trade show. So I'm not really sure how relevant it was either. I know it was exciting and it was different. I know it showed something that I guess our industry could embrace, but there wasn't that connection other than being something cute and sexy. I didn't really understand why it would be there. I don't know if you guys took it the same way.
I did not take it the same way. I think that we talked about this some time ago, the days of integrating lots of boxes within an AV environment in a corporate world are perhaps beginning to go away because the cost of the technology and the sophistication is meaning that it's simple, to quote Leonardo da Vinci. But the drone world is in a very early stage of development. You either go to Best Buy and buy a $500 drone, or you go to Northrop Grumman and buy a $2 million Predator, or whoever it is who makes Predators. And if you're the local ambulance service, EMS truck, you fly a drone, you fly a Predator over my house, right? I'm on the phone to someone. I don't know who I'd ring, but I'd ring someone and say, I don't know whose that Predator is, but I don't like that. But the toy stuff's not good enough. So there's this gap in the middle that seems to me like a ripe opportunity. Are all the AV resellers going to go into that world? No. Is a subset going to make some money out of it? I don't see any reason why not, because who else is going to do it if not them? It seems like a logical thing to do.
And that's exactly right, Simon. There is a subset. You certainly see it for first responder, right? You see it for emergency services. You see it for sporting events, right? There are verticals for this. But I think where we missed the mark at InfoComm in terms of messaging is that it, or is there more, right? Are there creative things that we should be thinking about on the use side of it where tying this in really makes sense? And I think that's where we missed it. All we saw were, oh, look at the pretty lights up in the sky.
Sure. I don't disagree, but you could argue that even 10 years ago, video conferencing was in much the same space. It's, oh, look at this, isn't it great? Well, what am I actually going to do with it? Right? And video conferencing is more obvious a use case than a drone, So you've got a 12-rotor drone that can lift 250 pounds. And I immediately think, I'm 220 pounds. I can go for a flight on a I mean, that's where my brain's... I'm not thinking, the use case scenario for this is... No one's come up with a use case scenario yet. I think there are a bunch of technologies looking for a solution, but I reckon they'll find a few in the next few years. Perhaps that's why they're going to all the shows, to find out where they live. I don't know, Dave.
So, well, let's talk about, let's move past our drones. Let's stop droning about drones. I wanted to avoid that, but I couldn't. And let's talk about what you said a second ago, Simon. We had talked about in our intro video the idea that the systems integrator days are kind of over. The idea of building these complicated custom systems. We thought that there would be a lot of pushback against that this year. Obviously, this is the integrator show, and for the most part, I think it's been pretty much accepted by the industry. Everybody was talking about the changing conference room. In my experience on the show floor, the vendors, certainly in the seminars that we attended, if you took a look at the Crestron booth, gorgeous booth. I'm sure they had control systems in this, but not at first glance. At first glance, they're talking about the next generation DM and 4K and certification. And if you take a look at the Cisco booth, Cisco predating Cisco Tandberg, these are always about integrator products and integrator systems. Now you're seeing things that you pointed out before. You unbox them, you plug in power, you plug in network, and you're done. So I think the industry has tacitly accepted what they've been fighting against when I was talking about it 2 years ago, which was, you'll have your 15, 20%, 10% use cases that will always need a very competent integrator. Your auditoriums and your theaters, and your stadiums and things that are always going to be specialty and custom, or atriums, everything else. But most of the conference room video and collaboration and other technologies now are really out-of-the-box, plug-and-play kind of things. And I don't think there was really any pushback against that at the show this year. Is that just my opinion? Am I getting that wrong, or do you guys see the same thing?
Well, can I, because I've lived on both sides of this story, right, for 20 years. So let me explain where I think the world has got to. The manufacturers have, over the last 15 years, watched, let's talk about video conferencing, because it will then incorporate in the new world the whole data collaboration, writing on whiteboards and stuff. But video conferencing 20 years ago, the video conferencing component, the codec, the cameras, the microphones, was a very significant part of the overall cost of the deal. So you would do a $300,000 room, and there would be a $100,000 video conferencing system in it. What's happened over the last 15, 20 years is that the price of the video conferencing codec has just dropped to pennies. I mean, a few $1,000s for a beautiful system. But the cost of the rooms has not dropped that much. And the manufacturers look at this and go, hang on, these people are keeping their margins up, but they are but not selling that many more devices, where I'm used to sell $100,000 devices and now sell $2,000 devices. Therefore, I need to sell 100 times more to keep my shareholders happy. So two things happen. Firstly, they take as much sophistication out of the solution for the integrators as they can to make it easier for the customer to buy a box. And they do that equally to try and keep the overall ASP, the average selling price of the technology, at a level at which they can still sell it. So a perfect example of that would be Cisco's new devices, all of which are beautiful. I mean, the M800, the M700, all those devices, gorgeous looking things, nothing to do with the original Tandberg solutions, both externally or internally, or cameras or microphones or anything. But they're two cables that plug into them, power and Ethernet, as you discussed earlier, and they can keep their value up even though they're robbing it from the reseller. And that's always been a dichotomy between who makes the money, the reseller or the manufacturer. Well, today, because the technology is relatively so sophisticated, it's simple, then the manufacturer is making more of the money. End of the rant.
David, do you agree?
Yeah, just to go back to the original question of whether I saw pushback on the floor, I don't see how anyone could push back against this. The new products, they are plug and play. They are simple. And we've been saying that for a long time, but it was plug and play and simple for your IT guy to make the call for you. Now it's really to the point where users can do it. So how could they push back? Say, no, they're not good. They're amazing. They're very good. The new stuff is great. Actually, it's not plug and play. You still need someone to set it up. No, it really is plug and play. So what I think the integrators have to do now is look for new ways to find value. Sure, you can buy a system and plug it into a huddle room. We could set up a system so we equip 30 of your huddle rooms, and they're all integrated, so you go into each one and it brings up your stuff, and it all has the right lighting and everything. They have to find new ways to add value because you can't push back against reality. These new products are plug and play.
I knew it was over for the integrators when I sent my mum, and I'll keep their name out of it. Actually, no, I won't, because they were very generous and gave me a system. Starleaf, I'm sure other manufacturers would do this. Starleaf gave my mum a video conferencing system so I could continue to talk to her on a Sunday morning. Right? She's 74. She's never done anything technological on her own ever, because my dad used to do it all until we lost him 2 years ago. And she plugged it in and had it working in 15 minutes. And in 15 minutes, she picked up didn't pick up the handset, pressed the button, dialed me, we were in a call. And my 74-year-old mother can do it. If she can do it, anyone.
Business. We'd hire her. Actually, the interesting thing about the whole space, in my opinion, is that most of the complex room integrators are building rooms as designed by the typical AV consultant, as ordered by the typical AV architect. And that entire path of doing things the way we used to do it is now about to be completely shattered and completely broken up. The integrator still has a role because, honestly, while there are tremendous numbers of good products hitting the market, there are also, as we were talking about early on in this, tremendous numbers of bad products hitting the market. Things that are just not very useful or not very customer-friendly or don't produce the kind of response or usability that you would think. So instead of making their margins on unnecessary custom programming, the integrator needs to become the trusted partner of the users and say, you know what, this solution works for you. I see what you need. It's different than what your neighbor needs. It's different from what the company down the hall needs. But now that I know what you need, here are things that'll work for you, and to be compensated for that advice and being that trusted partner. That's the future of integrators.
Well, I would to add to that, I agree entirely, but to add to that, there's also the sense of helping the customer understand how to get the most from the technology. So to talk to the client about business process re-engineering, and this is how other customers use this technology to improve their business, not you work it out, which is basically what we do today.
Yep.
That reminds me of a funny, one last quick thought. There's a funny internet meme that's gone around the internet, and it's a picture of a gentleman walking out from a grocery store to his car, holding his umbrella over his head. It's closed, and he's holding it, he's blocking the rain with his closed umbrella. He has the technology, but he's not using it correctly. And it really makes me think of our industry, because we have amazing umbrellas, our tools. We dump them on the users, and then we check in 6 months and say, oh, you're not opening the umbrella, you're not using it right. And I think that's a great place for the integrator to step in and help the users and say, hey, thank you for buying these tools from us. Let's make sure you're doing it right.
And you also have to have
sure
end users that are open to that message. A lot of my clients nowadays are still the technology people, and when I tell them I want to talk to their end users, they say, no, you can't talk to our end users. We've talked to our end users. We know what they want, and they don't. They haven't had that conversation and opened that dialogue. So getting into, dealing with the actual business units, creating, the desired outcomes as opposed to buying the technology and slotting it in is definitely going to be the future of where we go as an industry.
And Dave, I'm sorry, but I have to throw this last one in, right? Consider this, that Gartner claims that in the next 5 years, your average CMO will have a bigger IT budget than the IT department. They are going to start putting this technology in when the IT department isn't even looking. And that means it's all about business process. And if it is about technology, well, you're not going to sell it, because the CMO isn't going to sit there and listen to you as you say all these bits and bytes stuff. He's going to push you to the IT department and say, no, we know best, and we're not buying your solution because it doesn't say Cisco on it.
And it's certainly with more avenues now to communicate to your employee pool, more social networks, more marketing integrated into that messaging. I think we are going to see people going around IT to say, okay, IT, you might have known what the user wanted, but after you got it, you never told them you had it. You never told them how to use it. You never tied it back to the thing that was important to that department. And I think we're going to see more marketing and training departments involved in that side of it now.
I'm starting to see the term bimodal IT come out in describing this phenomenon, that you've got IT for the IT team and IT for the end user. So it's really very interesting. So to talk about IT, and let's deal, with the elephant in the room here. Let's talk about Microsoft for a second. I recall, Simon, you pretty much took them to task pretty strongly on our last call, and from my perspective, I think appropriately, after the years of research that we understand in the industry about how interactive whiteboards in the space have to be user-friendly. They have to be things you can just walk up to and start using. Microsoft comes out with the Surface Hub based on, a buggy new piece of software based on, PPI technology, which has been, not the most responsive touch panel that's ever existed in the world, prior to when they bought it. And it's the kind of thing that people are going to walk up to, not know how to use, say, oh my God, and never use it again. So I was...
But you mean like every other whiteboard?
Well, no, Smart has been in the industry now for, close to 20 years. Kudos to them for finally getting it right. Their whole new CAP series and their CAP IQ series, now they get it. I have a really funny thing on the internet, and we'll put up a link on the video so that you can see it. But talking about the cycle of whiteboards, if you want, or interactive boards, an executive goes to see it in their child's school on Parent-Teacher Day. They're totally floored by it. They walk back into the office the next day and they say, we need to buy 100 of these. And their AT and their AV and IT guys go, but no buts, just buy them. They buy them, they install them, they're never used. And that cycle has repeated itself over and over, because in a classroom, you have an owner. You have a person who is always in the room, willing to learn something, uses it every day, and gets good at it. And in an enterprise conference room, no one's going to learn something. If it's not able to walk up, push, ease, forget it. They're moving on to the next thing. And that's why Smart's products have always had problems in the enterprise until now. Now this gorgeous Cap IQ, which is no more than an electronic whiteboard with a pen, but it does everything you need to do to capture and share and save. Boy, is that a tale of two companies. I mean, I think it's most described by looking at Microsoft's booth. The entire show floor of InfoComm this year was wonderfully soft carpeted, some with padding, beautiful soft material, and you walk up to the Microsoft booth and they've got fake hardwood floors. Everything was harder with Microsoft this year. So, I mean, I think it's...
I can't agree, Dave. Mainly I can agree, but not completely. You write off Windows 10. No one's going to use it. It's nonsense. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. Millions and millions of people will use Windows 10 because they will simply upgrade to the latest. Now, I know the numbers for Windows 8 aren't that high because Windows 7 is apparently, I've never actually used either Windows 7 or Windows 8, but either of those applications or operating systems are fine operating systems. They seem to be pretty reasonable, a lot better than all the stuff that went previously. Windows 10 is going to have all sorts of advantages because it scales onto lots of different devices, down to Raspberry Pis. So a lot of people get used to it. And I think they'll be less intimidated by it if they walk up and go, oh, what's this? Oh, it's a touch panel Windows 10 computer. Now, I'm not saying that's what Microsoft showed off at the show. I'll be honest, I went for a demo, and ignoring the hour it took me to walk across the booth from one side to the other because it was so big and so empty, and then I sat down, and then a man started speaking about the panel, and he was so dull that I had to get up and leave because I was going to saw my own leg off if he didn't stop speaking just because of utter boredom. I think it was probably okay, and perhaps in the future much better. It's an interesting angle because at least they got something to show, unlike last year when they showed the World Cup.
So, David, I want to go back for a minute. You were talking about Smart and Cap IQ. I loved the product. I saw the product. I loved the product. I think the thing that Smart now needs to keep in mind as they look to the future is mobility. It's great. It's a fabulous product. But you know what? A lot of my people are on the road, and sometimes we're not in front of the physical product, and it has to be involved for the application to work. Mm-hmm. So I think it's those types of things that are going to help Smart as they move forward. Love the product. Love what it did. It absolutely addressed everything everybody's ever wanted from Smart. It was great. But that's the piece of it I think that needs to happen. And Simon, I agree. Windows is one of those things. It's a little bit inevitable, right, that we're going to see these things just from the standpoint of you're a Mac or you're a PC, and regardless of whether you want it or not, you upgrade to the latest because 2 years from now, your applications aren't going to work on it if you don't upgrade. Every time I get an iOS upgrade on my smartphone, I get at least 2 errors from old applications that no longer work, right?
Yeah, so Microsoft's been having a problem with that. Windows 8 only had a maximum 16% uptake because people stayed on Windows 7. They didn't like the new operating system. Windows didn't really listen.
I disagree. I disagree, Dave. They didn't not like it. It was work. It was put in 43 floppy disks, A through AAZ or whatever the letter was. Well, you know what I mean. It's painful to do. Where an OS X update is like, here's a new one, click, and it just works.
Well, more people are now moving to Chromebox. More people are now moving to Macs. So if it's not easy, it's going to be a problem for Microsoft. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So let's tie this back now to AV. which I complained about earlier. We talk about this thing, we don't tie it back. The whole point is now we don't have the problems anymore where we can't do video from a new laptop or we can't do video from our tablet or whatever because the operating system and the hardware in it doesn't allow for it. That's no longer the issue anymore. Now it's accommodating that. So as it's moving forward, the question is, how is it working with everything else we have? So, is WebRTC going to be it? Is there something else that's going to be incorporated into these operating systems that are going to be the new way of visual communications? Or does it not matter because the clients are going to work on anything or it's all going to be from a browser? And I think we no longer even care what the operating system is. We just have the assumption that all of this stuff is going to work. And that piece of the interoperability challenge has seemed to have gone away.
Yeah, and that was an amazing thing. Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Oh, just to follow up on that, I really, and I like the idea of tying this. Let's tie everything back into AV. And I think the hub is a great example of it. If you look at it as a product, there are criticisms to be made. I haven't seen David Danto so unhappy with something since the high five, but and you've only hit on like 10% of it here. If you read, if you go to Dave's blog, you'll read there's a lot of problems, and a lot of it's really, I mean, the lack of Active Directory. There's real stuff that's a problem with this product, but I was hanging out with the AVI SPL guys, and they were showing me what they're doing with it, and when he demoed it, it worked, and he had everything. He was able to show it off good. He was able to do a good demo, and hey, it does do some cool stuff. So I think it ties back into our community. If we're going to sell these things in Best Buy and hope people take them, plug them in, and adopt them, it's not going to happen. If it's integrated as part of a really good environment and people are trained and the whole process happens that they're supposed to do with adoption.
But that isn't going to happen. No one turns up to training courses, Dave. No one cares until they care, and at the point that they care, it must work right now. I mean, you know what I would argue? If I was Apple, I would simply go, and it's probably nothing, they'd look at it and go, well, it's not enough billions. This market's only worth $3 billion a year or whatever the number is. It's not worth it. But if I were Apple, I'd go, you know what? I think let's just build an 80-inch iPad. It doesn't need to be battery powered because I'm not going to do a call on it.
There are companies that have done that. InFocus has done that with the Mondo Pad. Microsoft moved into a semi-mature, or I don't want to use the word mature, but certainly thriving space of interactive displays where a lot of knowledge was out there that could have been learned and essentially ignored all of it. It was very similar to Cisco's approach to the telepresence space of like 7-8 years ago, where they ignored everything was out there, came up with their own product, and after the hype cycle was over, you realized they had to go and buy Tandberg and use that technology for most of what they're doing anyway. So, I mean, I don't want to keep belaboring the Microsoft point here, but I think if you take an interactive display, a display that's meant to be touched, and say it's so complicated that you actually have to partner with Crestron to make a touch panel to control the touch display, you've definitely got something that's too complicated for the screen.
It's horrible. If you want an example of a product that worked very well, in my opinion, and looked beautiful, was the Prism. I thought the Prism was a very impressive piece of technology. And they're not exactly giving those things away, but if Microsoft had that on their booth, you could say, ooh, that's that, hey, you heard it here first. Microsoft will buy Prism in 3 years when they've worked out they don't know how to use it.
Yeah. But so now I'm sitting in Cisco's Executive Briefing Center in San Jose today. That's just happened to where I happen to be today. And that's what they have here in the Executive Briefing Center. So in all the rooms that have the super enormous displays, they're all Prism displays.
Again,
and they all work
10-20% custom rooms, but still, you're making the point.
Exactly, because they're easy. They work every time. They're reliable. They're intuitive. We had executives giving presentations who had never been in the EBC before, walk in, able to bring up their presentation, able to adjust the screen to be what they wanted it to be just by moving something around, and off we went. 2 days of executive briefings, piece of cake.
Bridging off of that and off of something Simon said before as well, as we move forward a little bit here, one of the things that I thought was really fascinating, and I've been going to InfoComm for, well, it was my 37th year in the industry. I mean, a long time. I've been attending trade shows. We've always been talking about when will we be interoperable? When will we have interoperability? We need interoperability. And the truth is, with the exception of a few people out in their walled garden right now, we didn't really have that conversation at InfoComm this year. Everybody accepted the fact that interoperability is achievable, either through, the amazing technology that a company like Econo is doing, or however you want to set it up and put it in. We're all on different clients today using different products. There was never a question whether or not it was going to work anymore. What was interesting was everybody said, okay, now that we've gone over this interoperability hump, now it needs to be simple. How do we do it so that it's not something the user even needs to know? How can it be like a mobile phone where we just dial the number and everything happens, bits and bytes in the background? That seemed to be the theme out of the show this year is we don't want an integrator. We don't want an end user to have to go to a training class and a lunch and learn. How do we set everything up so that it's just easy to use? That'll be the ultimate winner. Did you guys see the same thing?
Yes and no. Yes, for all the people who were there, but who wasn't at InfoComm? Google or Apple. The two biggest walled gardens in the world weren't at the show. So we could also, oh, everyone plays nice now. Well, except for Google and Apple, never mind about them.
Actually, no, just to correct one thing you're saying, Google and Apple were definitely at the show. They just weren't exhibiting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, therefore, tell me about the interoperability between Google and Apple and the rest of us. Could you just talk that through? Oh, that's right. There isn't any. So if we just don't talk to everyone, we can turn around and say, yeah, we're all interoperable and it all works. Yes. Well, except for those two guys over there who are enormous. I mean, I don't know how we fix that, but that has to still be considered a problem.
You're making my case for the value of the next generation integrator, the trusted partner, the guy who said, yeah, it looks like Google has a really compelling solution, but it's actually not theirs. It's based on video. It's based on SVC. The SVC is nice, but it's a very old technology. And if you want to connect with anybody else who's not using it, you have to use a toll road, and you have to pay for the ability to do that. So that's where the value of the trusted partner comes in, is saying these are great island solutions, but we shouldn't be buying island solutions anymore. We should be buying things that work with everything else. And I think that's what I saw on a lot of the panels.
And I also think that the reason that we're not seeing them is a lot of their focus has been on consumer-based, right? We're not really concerned about security. And I don't know if anybody was watching this week. I thankfully was not on United this week. I was on Southwest. I didn't have to do anything with the stock exchange this week, thank goodness, right? We had a few things happen this week that, while they're being presented as, oh, we had a network upgrade issue or a router upgrade issue, I don't think any of us are under any misconceptions that there's something funny going on, and everybody is concerned about security, and everybody's concerned about an external force making an impact on something. And when we look at what has traditionally been the core of the AV industry, there is a lot of security built in. It's been part of the reason that it's used for business quality video. And those other players that are walled off and they're not presenting at InfoComm and all of that, well, they don't play nice with others because they want everything open. Well, that doesn't work in business. We need it to be secure. So I think that that's a key component as well. Until they're going to address those issues, they're not going to be invited to play.
Very good point. And I also did see a lot of the people that were at the show talking about security as an important piece, going back to the days that we were talking about of how an integrated room that has, 15, 18, 20 components in it, all from different manufacturers, all using different protocols, God forbid another heartbleed or something else comes out, you've got to not only update all of those components, if you even can, that are sitting on your core network or near your core network, but now you've got to first figure out if they all work together again after you've updated them, as opposed to, you pointed out, getting an MX700, MX800, one phone call to Cisco and saying, hey, what's the update patch for this? You put it in and you're done. It's another reason why a lot of people are not going to the integrated rooms. And I had a lot of people come up to me, talking to me about, we need to be talking about security, conference room security, unified communication security. We need to be having courses about this. We need to be dealing with this at every level of the conversation. And I expect you'll start to see it really grow. I mean, it's what I should have studied when I was studying technology growing up. We all should have gone into the security space. Can't hire those guys fast enough.
One final thought on interoperability. We have solved a lot of the problems, but something still seems a little off to me. I mean, it's great that I could be on Life-Size Cloud and someone could be on Starleaf and someone could be on Akano or whatever, and we can all call each other. But if I wanted to call you on the phone, I don't even know if you're on Sprint or on AT&T or what I'm on. I just call you. If I want to call you on Akano, I open up my Akano app. If I want to call you on Polycom Real Presence, I open up my Polycom Real Presence app. That's not the way our brains work. If I want to call a person, I should call the person and the technology should figure it out instead of, oh, let me pick which tool that person is on at this time. So
and I think
we're getting closer, but we're not there.
I think for video, and Polycom started to do this and then kind of stepped away from it. It was kind of strange, but where we're seeing it now in the cloud services, it's much more of a meet me. It's a CMR cloud, right? I have a personal room. It's Akano. It's Pexip. I have a personal room. I don't even care anymore what the number is. Here's my URL, and it belongs to my email, and it belongs to my personal room, and everything else, and it belongs to my iMessenger. And if you use that, you can text me, or you can call me on video, or whatever, and just meet me there. right? And it does require a little bit of forethought because you meet me there and then I have to send you a link that says, come meet me, because otherwise you don't know to call at the same time. I'm not calling you and man, we're connected. We're both calling into the same thing. Yeah. But I think that that's a lot of the way that the interoperability has been addressed. Rather than worrying about which client it is, it's meet at the bridge. And that's how it was back in the... Right. That's how it was back in the early days, and then everybody moved it down into the enterprise because the price of the infrastructure came down, and now nobody wants to maintain the infrastructure because of the upgrades again, so it's moving back to the cloud, and it feels like that's part of the way that it's being addressed.
And Jules, I would agree that that's what's happened, but I would disagree that that's necessarily what clients want. I mean, if I want to ring you, I don't want to say, Jules, I'll send you a note to say, meet me there. No, I just want to walk into your office, or the virtual equivalent of it. So I will say an advert for them, but they do a great job of it. Life-Size Cloud does the best job of that. Now, only within it, right, in that sense, but I can ring an individual and then just keep adding more and more individuals or groups of people, and it allows you to do one call without having to do this meet me in the middle solution. Well, it's got other advantages, stroke disadvantages, but that's a pretty powerful angle.
I think, though, as a society, we're moving to the concept of using a text-based message system, whether it's instant messaging or whether it's actual SMS on a phone or however we do it. That's really going to be, we don't even call anymore. Kids don't call, I don't call my kids. In work, we're all just texting each other, IMing each other, saying, are you available? It's the shortest, easiest, doesn't interrupt, whatever we're doing at any given moment. I can still be watching my son's play in school, but I can still, send that quick message off. And that's how you find out if somebody's available. So we're not calling each other on the spur of the moment anymore. I think that's a phenomenon that's kind of going away. We're calling each other when we said, hey, are you ready for a call? And when you say yes, you can give that number. We didn't pre-plan the technology around this call. We simply said, here's the number you dial. We passed it out to 4 professionals. They're calling for wherever they happen to be in their busy life. Jules, you were in a different spot than you were the first time. You just call the number and it works. We didn't have to pre-check whether the technology works. And that's a major step forward for where we're going in the industry.
I will agree. On a related topic, I would argue that customers 2, 3, 4 years ago were all about, well, why would I want to pay for this when I can get this from Skype or Google or Apple for free? Right? Mm-hmm. We were having to argue a few years ago against the free model. Well, I can have it for free. Why would I pay for this? And now people are beginning to realize that free, there's an old joke I've got somewhere where I created it, so I know it, and it's got 2 pigs lying in a field, and it says, isn't the farmer nice? He feeds us every day. He must love us. No. If the product's free, you're the product. Yep. Right? They will sell you to somebody else at some point in the future or do something with your information. Look how much Skype was worth. It certainly wasn't worth it for its technology. It was worth it for the 600 million people who had accounts. So I think that we're moving now into a world that's adjacent to what we've just discussed, but it's about people are more interested in convenience than they are in free. I'm not suggesting they will pay tens of thousands of dollars for solutions, but they will pay some money if the product is really useful and good and easy and they don't have to think about it, rather than something that's free that's hard to use. They simply won't use free if it's hard to use because there's so much of it.
Yep. All right, let's move forward to the topic that I know is on the session that I moderated. And Jules, you did an entire special panel on Thursday around the concept of the changing workspace and workspaces for tomorrow. And a lot of interest in that space still do. And we've been talking about, I've been talking till I'm blue in the face, rallying about how you can't sell video conferencing products against travel savings. And I'm sorry, I know you're in San Jose and they still do that, but you still can't do it because I can give you 2 tin cans on a string, and then at the end of the year show you metrics that the 2 tin cans on a string gave you travel savings. Meanwhile, I just cut your budget, and I could have done that without the tin cans. But the fact that I'm here in my office, and my office is in my home, and I don't need to commute 5 days a week, twice a day, 50 weeks out of the year, that's real savings, not just in terms of in the environment, but in my out-of-pocket savings cost. But that's savings that they don't need as big an office, and they don't need a desk for me, and they don't need to buy air conditioning for me because I'm already paying for it here, and they don't need to buy internet or networking for me because I'm already paying for it here. And that's turning into some real cost savings that you're starting to see a lot of organizations really start to take seriously. So we're no longer densifying the office. We're essentially saying the office for most employees is wherever you are. And I think that that's a trend that was growing a lot of interest in that. Did you guys see that as well?
I do see that, and I think that you're not even categorized anymore necessarily as a mobile worker. But no matter what category you fall into, even if you're going into the office every day, you're a mobile worker. You're doing work from your cell phone. You're checking emails. You're taking calls in your off time. You're doing things from your laptop. You're checking things from home. You're jumping on a video call, particularly when you're dealing internationally and you're dealing with all these crazy time zones. Nobody's going to drive into the office to be on a call with Asia at 9 o'clock at night unless you absolutely had to. You're going to do it from your house, from your laptop. And all of those things are happening. And we did a whole session on it. We had some great panelists come in, and we talked about the fact that the physical workspace is transforming. What you see in the office is different than what you used to see. Workspaces are smaller. You have higher density because you're not spending necessarily as much time in the building. You're working from wherever you are. But the other factor that's really driving that change is the fact that 18% of the workforce is going to retire over the next 5 years. On average, it's reported that it costs about $250,000 per professional to replace them. So of that 18% of the workforce that's retiring, you've got a high level of professionals that are retiring. And the challenge I have is that my millennials are coming in, and rather than staying with the company 9 to 15 years like the boomers did, the millennials are changing companies every 3 years. And the shift that's trying to be addressed is, if I have to engage my employees better, and I do want them to change jobs every 3 years, but I want them to do that within my own company. I don't want them changing because I'm losing all this knowledge, right? How do I address that? That's where collaboration really came back into this conversation. And I heard it all over. I heard it in the sessions. I heard it down on the exhibit hall floor. How do I address this problem? And that's where they said, okay, well, great. You take these collaboration products and you use them so that your boomers are now mentors to your millennials. And all of a sudden, the millennials feel like they're being heard again and they're being engaged and their contribution matters. And now they're going to stay, hopefully, a little bit longer. And that's the metric we're going to look at is, did my turnover rate go down? Right?
Well,
Did I extend the boomers out a little bit longer so that I didn't take a huge hit in 5 years? I spread it out over 7 or 9, right? That's what we're looking for. I'm sorry, Simon, go ahead.
No. Joe, I think it's great stuff. I mean, in some senses, this is analogous to the energy industry. One of the greatest ways that the electricity industry is now being more efficient or building better power stations is to not build them at all. By making all of their present customers 10% more efficient means you don't need another nuclear power station. That saves them a packet of money and a lot of hassle. So the other thing to consider, and therefore getting workers to work from home, not in an office, does the same thing. But I think this is the other thing. In my father's generation, he took a job. He worked for the same company for 31 years, I think it was. He got the job, moved him and my mother to a town that was 5 miles away from the company and started a life. And my sister and I never moved until we were 15, 16 years old. When he did it again, moved to another town. Today, the whole idea of people saying, right, I'm going to join this new company, but it's particularly in the US, it's 1,000 miles away in another city. Well, if you're 25, you might go, ooh, great adventure. But if you're 35 and you've got 2 kids in middle school, it's a terrible idea. It's awfully and you don't want to, otherwise everyone becomes a military brat. You know, we all have a friend who grew up everywhere. And who wants their entire community, their entire culture to be one of, oh yeah, I moved my kids every 2 years out of this school to that school to that school. I never made any friends because I was always chasing the dollar. What a terrible way of doing business. This means you can live wherever.
You've told a story recently about your whole workforce, right, that follows that model?
I was gonna say, my company, we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary, and it's not just that we're able to do things differently than companies did them in the past. It's not just we can be more flexible. I could allow my workers to stay home more than before. This company would not have existed 5 years ago. I have never met any member of my team in person. We're all remote, and it hit me when my CMO said to me a few weeks ago, out of the blue, David, how tall am I? This is a person I see face-to-face every day, sometimes hours a day, for over a year. I know them as well as anyone I've ever worked in a physical office with. We've gotten as much done in a year as anyone could hope for a new business to do. I've never met any of them in person. And it's not just, like I was saying, that's something that couldn't have happened. Yeah, for all I know, right? That's something that couldn't have happened.
We used to joke about this. They're either 6'3" or 4'2". I used to joke on the early days of video conference. We used to say, "Oh, this is Marley Khan, my colleague at the other end. How tall do you think Marley is?" And they go, "Oh, about 5'7". We go, "No, actually, he's about 3'2". But don't tell him because he doesn't like height being brought up." He used to discombobulate clients nicely.
The line from the movie The Stuntman: "How big is King Kong?" Right, 6 inches. Well, it's actually a great story, and David, you wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have such a robust social media capability nowadays, because you combine the beautiful interaction and the collaboration with the same kind of camaraderie you would have gotten in the office, and you now have this wonderful complete package that lets me work remotely but still be a great part of the team whenever I need to. It's not even a question anymore whether or not it works, just like you. It's just naturally how we do it. So before I go into some of the housekeeping and wrap up, any closing thoughts around what you saw, what surprised you, anything I forgot to bring up this time around?
Can I start just by saying I was disappointed. The show was fun, and it was interesting. It was great to see a bunch of people, and there was some amazing technology out there. I will say people were terrible almost exclusively. There was one guy who did it very well. Almost exclusively, everyone was terrible at demonstrating to clients why they should care less about their technology. They machine gun people in the face with facts until the customer either fell off their booth, just saying, "Enough, I can't handle this anymore," or "Just take my money and shut up." The guy at the back who was selling cutting discs and welding equipment and other stuff, he did a 5-minute demo. At the end of the 5-minute demo, you either left with one of these and a little bit lighter in your wallet, or you didn't, and that was it. And he pushed them through his machine. Everybody else just waffled. They've got to fix this. If they're going to sell well in the next 5 years, 10 years, you spend millions, hundreds of thousands at least, of dollars on a show floor, and then it's like renting a theatre and not having a script or any actors. I mean, it's absurd. You work it out. It's not the right answer.
I think, Simon, you've been a little spoiled over the last few years because you're doing more presenting than walking around. I think I actually kudos to a lot of the people that were demonstrating this year. There were a lot less of the guys that you're describing than there were in the past, which tells you how bad it used to be. But we did see some people that were talking about solutions and outcomes and explaining and not dealing with the bits and bytes. But, anybody doing technology first is making a mistake anyway. Go ahead, Jules. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I have to agree that there were people speaking to business outcomes. We heard that in the sessions quite a bit. On the exhibit hall floor, they were demonstrating products, and they weren't talking about, here's what it feels like when you walk onto a manufacturing floor and why the AV makes a difference. Here's what it feels like when you walk into a hospital room and why it makes a difference. And here's what it feels like. We didn't get as much of that this year. It wasn't on the exhibit hall floor. It was definitely in the sessions, but it wasn't on the exhibit hall floor. And Simon, I got to agree with you there. It would have been better if it was. I saw it previously at Cisco Live, and it was very well done. So it would have been nice to have seen it at InfoComm as well.
Okay. So then I'll let that be the last word. I do want to remind everybody that we're all coming to you through the auspices of the IMCCA, and there really is no reason for you not to join the IMCCA. It's imcca.org, and a great organization, free end-user membership, very inexpensive for organizational members to join. We also, this year, as a special treat, we have all of the session presentations as part of the UC Summit that took place. And we actually, thank you to Simon, who brought his camera, have video recordings of all the ones that took place on Wednesday. These are on a special microsite that you can get to, imccainternational.org, and feel free to download those and look at those. The last piece of housekeeping that I wanted to explain is that we're going to be showing and detailing a lot of the good content we talked about here at InfoComm Connections in New York, which is taking place this November, the 11th to 12th in the Javits Center. And you guys should definitely come down and take a look at that. If you're interested in this kind of content or these kind of sessions or this kind of discussion, that's definitely the place to be to get involved with us in person coming up soon. So thank you all.
Okay. And IMCCA will be hosting another How to Prepare for the Changing Workplaces session at InfoComm Connections in New York.
So again, everybody, thanks very much for joining us. I appreciate being together with my gang of four. We'll do this again the next time the technology news warrants, and see you all real soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.